Have you ever felt tired of your own life? As if each day were a meaningless repetition and every effort was in vain. Know this. That feeling is not weakness. It is a sign that something deep is trying to speak to you. And what if I told you there is a way of looking at this tiredness that changes everything without needing to run away or hide? Believe it, most people ignore this call. They remain trapped in routine, in the opinion of others, in distractions that promise instant happiness. But what Sartre shows us is almost counterintuitive. The answer is not outside you, it is inside. Yes, inside your own consciousness, in the freedom you have and that you may have tried to deny. And here comes the provocation. You are not a victim of life, you are its author. Every choice, every gesture, every thought shapes who you are. And it is precisely this responsibility that causes the anguish, the existential tiredness that seems overwhelming. But understanding this is the first step to transform suffering into power. Imagine being able to transform emptiness into opportunity, repetition into creation, and the absurd into freedom. What seemed like a burden becomes a tool. In this video, you will discover how Sartre's philosophy can teach you to deal with life's tiredness, to embrace your freedom, and to act with authenticity. If topics like psychology, philosophy, and the darkness of the human soul interest you, subscribe to the channel now. From which place in the world are you watching this video right now? Leave your answer in the comments. There are days when life weighs like a wet coat, hard to take off your shoulders. You wake up, look in the mirror, and the feeling is being tired even before starting. Sunday, which should be rest, becomes a reminder that the routine does not change. It is as if each week were a repeated movie. And as much as you know the ending, you still feel stuck in the movie theater. This tiredness is not only physical, it is an existential exhaustion. The repetition of mistakes, the broken promises, the traps that seem to come in looping. Like a player who always falls into the same trap in the video game, even already knowing where it is. At each step, life sounds too predictable. And it is in this monotony that many begin to wonder if they were born in the wrong body. Imagine thinking that your life should be different, but nothing actually changes. Work seems like a poorly rehearsed play, responsibilities sound absurd, and even opinions lose meaning. Solve big dilemmas of the world? Hard when we cannot even solve small bureaucracies. This contrast generates frustration, as if life were an unfair match, already rigged against you. Who has never felt like pausing everything? To hit quit in the game of existence, just to breathe. This feeling has already been present in so many people, especially in youth, when the weight of adult life begins to press. The curious thing is that nobody teaches how to deal with this shock. One day you are a child with dreams. The next you are an adult buried in bills. The leap seems too cruel. The narrator of tiredness knows this well because he has already lived this fall. At 20 years old, with the whole life ahead, he just wanted to run away. But escape never solves. It only postpones the confrontation. It was necessary to face the pain. With medicines, therapies, attempts at meditation. Still, nothing seemed to be enough, until a philosophical idea crossed the darkness. This idea did not come as a self-help manual, but as an existential punch. It did not promise to eliminate suffering, but to change the look upon it. It is like when a science fiction movie makes you question if you are really in reality. Suddenly, everything that seemed banal gains another color. It is not that problems disappear, but you learn to see them differently. Tiredness, then, ceases to be only weakness. It becomes a sign, almost like an internal alarm. You are not only exhausted, you are being called to look beyond the surface. The body complains, the mind protests, and something in you asks for change. It is at this point that emptiness begins to reveal itself not as an end, but as an invitation. But an invitation to what? Here comes the mystery. When life seems stupid and meaningless, when even getting out of bed requires Herculean strength, the question arises that opens the way. What really is the I? This interrogation, which seems simple, can become a key. Because perhaps the problem is not life itself, but the way you see yourself inside it. To understand the weight of existential tiredness, it is first necessary to face an ancient question. What is real? Since the first philosophers, this doubt echoes like an enigma. Could the world we see be true, or just a well-constructed illusion? It is like watching Matrix and thinking, what if my life is nothing more than a program running in some cosmic system? The simple act of suspecting already takes the ground from under our feet. Descartes tried to solve this and arrived at the famous idea, I think, therefore I am. It seems simple, but this phrase became a watershed. After all, even if the whole universe were a mistake, the act of thinking would already prove that there is something genuine inside us. It is like playing a game in virtual reality. Even if the scenario is false, the player still exists. But is that enough? That is where Sartre enters the game, messing up certainties. If the I really exists, where is it? When you try to imagine yourself, what appears? The face in the mirror? The name you were given? The voice that echoes in your head? All this seems real, but something strange happens. Whenever you try to grab the I, it slips away, like sand between your fingers. Imagine the scene. You close your eyes and try to hear your own inner voice. Who is speaking? And more importantly, who is listening? It seems that inside us, there are two actors, the one who thinks and the one who observes the thought. This division leaves us intrigued, almost as if there were two consciousnesses playing chess inside the same mind. But which one is true? Sartre proposes that this search for the I requires another key, transcendence. He uses a curious example, the simple banana. Looked at from the outside, it seems obvious. But if we change the angle, if we dive into the microscope, we realize that we never knew it completely. What we see is only a limited representation of what it really is. And let's face it, this applies to everything. Think of any object, a stone, a tree, even a person. We always see only a fragment, never the whole. We always see only a fragment, see only a fragment, never the whole. Human consciousness is like a flashlight. It illuminates parts of reality, but it cannot capture the entire scene. You look at a rainbow and do not see photons. You hear a song and do not perceive the physics behind the sound. You only access a reduced version of the real. And what if this also happens with ourselves? When we illuminate our own existence, we create a mental image. The name, the story, the face reflected in the mirror. But none of this is the true core. This is Sartre's great turning point. Consciousness and ego are not the same thing. The ego is only an object that consciousness illuminates, not the source of the light. From this view, the I ceases to be a fixed point and becomes a process. We are not a static entity, but a flow, a flashlight that moves. This idea may sound confusing at first glance, but it also opens a powerful gap. Because if the I is not fixed, then it can be recreated. But recreated into what exactly? Sartre reminds us that freedom is a responsibility that frightens. It is not only choosing between two options. It is realizing that everything you do defines who you are, as if each decision were a brushstroke on a blank canvas. And at the same time, you do not receive instructions on how to paint. This feeling can be overwhelming, but also liberating, if you know how to look at it carefully. Imagine waking up and realizing that no external rule really dictates your life. The boss, society, even family can pressure, but the final weight is on your shoulders. It is like being at the wheel of a car without GPS. You decide the path, but you also carry the risk of making mistakes. And it is exactly there that existential tiredness finds its cruelest point. Total responsibility hurts because it exposes the absurdity of existence. Nothing has a given meaning. Everything is constructed. A movie we watch 1,000 times could be seen differently if we change the perspective, but few dare to change. Most get used to the ready-made script, even if it is unsatisfying. Sartre pokes this comfort zone, challenging those who feel tired of life to move. It is interesting to think that freedom is not a luxury, but a demand. Even to lie down and procrastinate, you choose consciously. Every choice, however trivial it may seem, carries with it a declaration of who you want to be. It is not an exaggeration. Even deciding to ignore a problem is to assume something about yourself. And that is what gives vertigo, almost like looking at the abyss without a safety net. Many times, life seems like a sequence of mechanical tasks. But Sartre says that behind routine, there is a hidden opportunity to choose consciously. Washing the dishes, walking to work, making a coffee, everything can be done as an act of presence, of affirming one's own existence. When you realize this, even the banal gains depth. The problem is that few truly see this dimension. The world preaches distraction, shortcuts, conformity. Movies, social networks, and even the inner noise of the mind distance us from the feeling that we are constantly creating our own lives. And it is in this gap between perception and distraction that the existential fatigue Sartre so often describes is born. And if you begin to face your freedom, you also discover the emptiness it brings. Nothing guarantees success, happiness, or purpose. Everything depends on what you decide to do. It is like opening a door and finding an empty room. The potential is infinite, but so is the fear. This awareness is frightening, but it is the first step toward finding your own meaning. In the end, Sartre does not offer ready-made solutions. He only places before us the possibility of creating. Life, with all its repetition and fatigue, ceases to be mere suffering. Each choice, each step, even a small one, is a chance to affirm, I exist, I decide, I am. And it is precisely this perspective that prepares the ground for the next level of understanding, where action meets total responsibility. When Sartre speaks of the absurd, he does not want to frighten, but to show reality stripped bare. Life, many times, has no evident meaning. It is like being in a movie without a defined script, where you are at once the protagonist and the audience. This sensation of drifting is frightening, but it also reveals a rare opportunity, the chance to create meaning. The absurd appears in the simplest moments. You get up, work, talk, eat, and everything seems to repeat without reason. But it is precisely in this cycle that philosophy emerges as light, allowing you to see beyond the trivial. It is like realizing that a song you have already heard 1,000 times can still move you if you pay attention to the details. It is interesting to note that fatigue and the absurd walk together. The more we feel that life is heavy and repetitive, the more this awareness of nothingness invades us. But Sartre says that we must not flee from this. Facing the absurd is paradoxically the way to conquer it. It is like facing a monster in a video game. Only by defeating it do you move forward. The awareness of the absurd also gives us freedom. If nothing is given, then everything can be invented. A simple gesture, a courageous choice, a change of routine, everything becomes meaningful. It is like a painter who turns a white wall into a masterpiece. The canvas was there, but only he could fill it. In daily life, dealing with the absurd requires presence and courage. Walking down the street, interacting with colleagues, or even preparing dinner acts filled with meaning when we realize that we are the authors of each moment. It is at this level that Sartre's philosophy ceases to be theory and becomes practice, almost like an art of living. And when we look at life this way, fatigue ceases to be only weight. It transforms into a warning, a sign that we are aware. The body complains, the mind questions, and something inside us shouts, "You can choose, even here, even now." This is the turning point that many let pass unnoticed. Sartre shows that the lack of meaning is not failure, but invitation. Emptiness is not a hole, but a blank space ready to be filled. Each small act of decision, each conscious gesture, is an act of creation. It is in this instant that life, once heavy and tiring, begins to take on its own contours. And it is at this point that the next step reveals itself as inevitable. If we understand the absurd, if we face freedom and responsibility, we begin to question not only the world, but what we do within it. The stage is set, and the next scene demands conscious action, no longer escape or distraction. Sartre reminds us that anguish exists precisely because we are free. It is not just any sadness. It is that feeling of weight in the chest upon realizing that everything depends on us. As if we were at the top of a cliff, staring at the abyss, and knowing that the leap is inevitable. It is frightening, but it is also the very essence of existence. Anguish is different from fear. Fear has a defined object, while anguish arises from nothingness, from freedom itself. It is like playing chess against yourself and realizing that each move defines your destiny. This awareness often paralyzes, but it also awakens us to the depth of our responsibility. Many people try to escape anguish by seeking distractions, social networks, series, parties. But Sartre teaches that these escapes only delay the inevitable. Ignoring the void does not solve it. It remains, knocking silently at the door. It is like trying to block out the sun with your hand. The light still filters through your fingers. The encounter with anguish can be transformative. When we accept that it is part of freedom, we begin to realize that each choice, no matter how small, carries power. Choosing how to react, where to go, with whom to be, becomes an affirmation of our own existence. Even daily life gains intensity when faced this way. Sartre compares life to a theater without a script. We do not receive instructions on how to act, nor guarantees applause. Anguish arises from the empty stage, from the awareness that each act is our responsibility. But it is exactly this lack of guarantees that gives us the opportunity to create, to invent, to leave a mark. It is curious to realize that anguish brings us closer to authenticity. When we stop deceiving ourselves, blaming the world or others, we see the truth. We are the authors of ourselves. This clarity hurts, but it also frees, like waking from a confusing dream and realizing that all that matters is what we decide to do now. Accepting anguish does not mean resignation, but active awareness. It is feeling the weight, taking a deep breath, and deciding to act anyway. It is like a game character who, even surrounded by impossible challenges, chooses to advance. Each step is an act of courage, a silent manifesto. I exist and I decide to exist fully. And it is at this point that Sartre's philosophy connects with everyday practice. Life continues, tiring, repetitive, sometimes absurd. But now, with a new prism, we are not at the mercy of the world, but are constant creators of our own existence. And it is this awareness that naturally leads us to the next level of reflection. Sartre warns us that bad faith is the most common trap of existence. It is when we deceive ourselves, saying that we are not responsible for our choices, like blaming the boss, routine, or luck for what we are, while ignoring our own freedom. This illusion gives momentary comfort, but it imprisons the soul and increases life's fatigue. Bad faith appears in everyday gestures. A repeated, "I can't." An automatic excuse. The procrastination that makes us feel like victims. But the truth is that we can always decide, even if the choice is painful or risky. It is like being locked in a room with the key in your hand and pretending not to see it. The curious thing is that we all fall into this trap. Denying freedom is trying to protect ourselves from the weight of responsibility. But this protection is fragile. The more we try to deceive ourselves, the more we perceive the lack of meaning and existential fatigue. Sartre prods this wound to show that fleeing does not solve it. Recognizing bad faith requires brutal courage. It is facing that we are the authors of everything, even of wrong choices. Each decision, each postponement, each excuse is a reflection of ourselves. Like a painter who observes his own imperfect work but knows he can retouch and reinvent the canvas. And it is in this recognition that authenticity begins. Instead of living according to others' expectations, we can assume that each step is the result of our own will. It is liberating to realize that the world does not give us definitive orders. We are the ones who give meaning to each lived moment. In daily life, authenticity manifests itself in simple acts. Choosing what to eat, what to wear, how to speak, with whom to be, everything becomes an expression of freedom. Even the most banal gestures become meaningful when assumed consciously and not as automatic repetition. Sartre shows that accepting our freedom is also accepting risk. To err, to fail, to feel pain, all of it is part of genuine existence. But it is precisely this risk that gives life depth, that turns fatigue into a warning and repetition into an opportunity for change. And it is at this point that Sartre's thought connects with practice. By facing bad faith and embracing freedom, we begin to live with more intensity, responsibility, and presence. Each choice ceases to be mere routine and becomes a personal manifesto, opening the way for the next reflection. Solitude, according to Sartre, is not just the absence of company. It is an opportunity to meet oneself. Being alone reveals the weight of one's own freedom and the need to face one's own existence. It is like entering a dark room and lighting a candle. At first, it is frightening, but the light reveals details that were previously hidden. In silence, we realize that each choice is exclusively ours. The opinion of others, social pressure, all lose strength before the responsibility of deciding. It is at this moment that existential fatigue can transform into clarity, showing that life is not imposed, but built minute by minute. Solitude also allows us to reflect on our own fears and desires. Without external distractions, each thought gains relevance and self-awareness becomes intense. It is like pausing a movie and observing each scene, each gesture of the characters, discovering nuances that go unnoticed when we are distracted. On the other hand, solitude frightens because it confronts emptiness. Silence amplifies doubts, and the mind, without interference, reveals insecurities and regrets. But it is in this confrontation that true strength is born. Only those who face their own essence discover what they are capable of, even before the feeling of being lost. Sartre suggests that solitude is a school of authenticity. Those who allow themselves to be alone learn to make decisions without depending on approval. Each conscious act becomes an expression of who one truly is. It is an exercise that requires courage but rewards with clarity and mastery over one's own life. In daily life, this can be applied in simple ways. Walking alone, reflecting on choices, writing down thoughts, or simply sitting in silence are exercises that strengthen awareness. Little by little, life's fatigue loses its crushing weight and becomes a warning of presence. In addition, solitude allows you to recognize and embrace freedom without fear. Understanding that there are no external guarantees and that all meaning must be created internally is liberating. It is like learning to swim alone in the ocean. Frightening at first, but with each stroke, confidence grows and the view widens. And it is in this process that the ground is prepared for the last step, to transform awareness, freedom, and solitude into meaningful action. Those who understand the weight and strength of these elements are ready to face life deeply, with authenticity and courage, ready for the final chapter of Sartre's reflection. Sartre reminds us that action is the inevitable consequence of freedom. Awareness awakens us, fatigue alerts us, and anguish pressures us to decide. Nothing happens without us. Nothing is built alone. Each step, no matter how small, is a manifestation of what we are. It is like writing a story without a draft. Each word counts. Conscious action transforms emptiness into opportunity. The absurd ceases to be an obstacle and becomes a blank canvas. Choosing how to live, how to behave, even how to feel, reveals the strength of those who assume their existence. Daily life, once heavy and repetitive, gains intensity and meaning. Even mistakes become valuable. Deciding wrongly is learning. It is the exercise of freedom. Sartre teaches us that there is no cosmic punishment, only the natural consequence of what we choose. As in a game, each attempt brings us closer to understanding life's dynamics, to approaching our authenticity. Courage becomes essential. To act, it is necessary to face fear, anguish, and solitude. Each conscious decision requires facing the discomfort of fully existing. It is like climbing a mountain without a rope. The view compensates the risk, and the sense of conquest is unique. In daily life, acting means assuming responsibilities we previously ignored. It is choosing to be present in one's own relationships, at work, in simple decisions. Each small gesture ceases to be automatic and becomes an act of affirmation, reminding us that we are alive and that our existence has weight and meaning. Sartre suggests that freedom without action is incomplete. Thinking and reflecting are essential steps, but if they do not culminate in choices and attitudes, we remain paralyzed. Awareness needs to become movement and life's fatigue, a reminder that we are called to participate actively in the world. Life, with all its repetition and challenges, ceases to be a burden when faced this way. Each choice, each action, even a minimal one, is the affirmation of the self that exists, that decides, and that creates meaning. The weight of daily life transforms into energy to create, transform, and live fully. And it is at this point that all Sartrean reflection converges. Freedom, responsibility, absurdity, and solitude are not enemies, but allies. They challenge us, strengthen us, and call us to act. Those who understand this are ready to transform fatigue into movement and repetition into continuous creation, opening the door to the introduction of the video. After diving into Sartre's philosophy, it becomes clear that life's fatigue is not a sign of weakness, but an invitation to assume one's own freedom. Each choice, each conscious gesture, even the small ones, defines us and gives us power over our existence. What seemed heavy can become fuel to create meaning. So, what did you think of this content? Did you manage to feel the impact of realizing that it is you who writes your own story, even in the face of the absurd and repetition? What choices will you begin to assume today to live with more authenticity? If you want to continue learning about philosophy, freedom, and self-knowledge, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, you will find reflections that transform fatigue into strength and repetition into opportunity, always with real examples and deep insights. These two videos in front of you are not here by chance. And if everything you believe about yourself is only a reflection of someone else's gaze, click now on one of the videos on the side and start breaking that mirror. You will have to risk the click. So, which one will you choose?